Brigade presents The Realty Debate, powered by Reliance Home Finance with Manisha Natarajan.
Welcome to the Realty Debate. Today, the discussion is focused on making the real estate industry better for both the buyer and the seller, which is your developer community, the seller part. A powerful act which serves this purpose is RERA, or the Real Estate Regulation Act, which was notified on May 1st this year. A month later, we are asking the question on behalf of the buyers: are states geared up to implement RERA? Otherwise, this might just become a victory for nothing. A second debate is on doing business in India, especially in real estate, and is the ease of doing business improving? And this one is strictly for the industry participants. Now, while the government has announced several steps at the centre and state, including time-bound online approval process for building and construction permissions, we'll be asking the industry experts, how well will these work? Why should you, the buyer, be interested in the second half of our debate? For one reason alone: delays are costly, and all delays get passed on to you, the buyer, as a higher price for the home you buy. So let's get started. We've got plenty to thrash out today. Joining me today, M.R. Jayashankar, CMD Brigade Group for Bangalore; Baman Irani, CMD Rustomjee and Vice President MCHI CREDAI and Secretary CREDAI; also Rohit Rajmodi, Director Ashiana Homes Private Limited and Vice President CREDAI; Harsh Rungta, SEBI Registered Investment Advisor and founder of harshrungta.com. Also with me here in the Delhi studio, Rakesh Khatana, Senior Lawyer, Supreme Court, and Sameer Jasuja, Founder and MD, Prop Equity. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. I think I'm just going to set the stage for all the viewers to also get to know what we're talking about. Now, the movement in implementing RERA after the parliamentary nod to this act, let's just put that in perspective. It was notified effective May 1st, 2016 by the Housing Minister. But only certain sections of the Act have been notified, a total of 69 out of 92 sections. Specific rules have to be formulated by the central and the state governments by October 31st, 2016. So October, deadline is not too far away. So remember, just a few months. This is under Section 84 of the Act. Post that, now post October, what happens? The ball moves entirely into the court of states. They have to set up state level real estate regulatory authorities by April 31st, 2017 under Section 20. Now, we are raising a few big questions around the implementation of RERA, because a lot of buyers, as we know, with the Twitter outbursts, just what's happening across the country, everybody is looking forward to RERA, at least from the buyer's perspective. Now, Real Estate Act falls under the concurrent list, and state governments are entitled to legislate on RERA. So basically, don't go back to your civics course. Just remember that state governments have the authority to decide the real estate rules, and therefore also RERA. So the first question that I'm going to ask my panelists: are states going to follow the timeline laid out? Is there enough political will to set a regulator? Now, the second question is, what if they don't? What's the penalty? And finally, is it likely that the rules themselves might get diluted? Because if you read the fine print of the Act, there is some room for that as well. All right, so let's get started. I think the first question is about the deadline. Let me start with you, Mr. Jayashankar. How hopeful are you that the deadline of RERA will be met, October 31st and April 2017, for setting up state-level regulatory bodies?
Manisha, I think all states will be working towards it, and Karnataka, where we are located, will be no exception. I am sure Karnataka will also set up. But if there is a likely delay, I'll not be surprised if a few states seek extension of time. And for that matter, the entire act, instead of October 31st, there is a possibility it can get pushed by a couple of months. After all, this is a new act, and some states may take time. But if you see the earlier similar acts, whether it is the Environment Act under the Environmental Protection or the Urban Land Ceiling Act a couple of decades back, which was also a central act, but states had to implement it and have to have their own authorities. So in such cases where the state government did not set up environmental authority, right, till such time they set it up. It was referred to the center. So something similar thing may happen here. I will not be surprised.
Okay, so that's an interesting point. If states don't set it up, you will at least have a central regulatory authority where the matter can be taken to. Rohit Rajmodi, what is CREDAI's own position on setting up of RERA? There are certain states which are taking the lead. Maharashtra, for example, has brought in a very, very outstanding IAS officer, Gautam Chatterjee, to actually set out the rules, and he knows the lay of the land very, very well when it comes to Mumbai especially. How hopeful are you of NCR? Let's take Haryana and UP. How hopeful are you?
If you look at Haryana and UP, both of these states have had their own apartment act which has been in practice for a long time.
But they're subsumed now, right? Won't they get subsumed?
They will get subsumed. I agree with you. But having said that, because these acts have been in vogue for a while, it will be easier for these states' mechanisms to, sort of upgrade to the new act and get going, as compared to those states where probably as of today, no similar, act in any version exists. So I do think that Haryana and UP both would be fairly well in the place to meet the given deadlines.
Okay, let's then go to Maharashtra. Baman, you must be the happiest man. So we'll come to ease of doing business a little bit later. But your state and your city specifically seems to be fairly taking the lead when it comes to reinvigorating, or let's say rewriting the rules of doing real estate business. So RERA, how hopeful are you that Maharashtra at least will meet the deadline?
So, Manisha, we in Maharashtra have been, always following MOFA. And MOFA has been around for a very long time. Our developers are very well versed with what really is required to be done. Out here, I think the political will is a little bit of an urgency. They are absolutely wanting to clock in terms of the timelines. I imagine that we will not only be able to achieve, but we might beat and be a little timeline itself in setting this up, and I would say this is very, very good. I would not, answering your second question about the urgency, I don't see any reason for any urgency. What has been waiting for 65 years in terms of not having a regulatory authority needn't be rushed through. What is more important as we get it all right, we get it in favor of the consumer who this has been drafted for, but it should not become a witch hunting tool in the hands of people who try to kind of bring developers in that development down.
All right, Baman. I mean, that's something which we've been hearing from developers, and it's a very, very valid point. My only question is that when you talk about MOFA, now I'm going to go to Harsh Rungta here. When you talk about MOFA, which now gets subsumed, Harsh, MOFA, despite protecting or having literally every law, which probably now the regulator will borrow from and take from it, how effective was it? I mean, I really didn't see any builder getting penalized in a big way under MOFA, or am I mistaken?
I mean, I don't think that's a subject matter of debate that MOFA was completely ineffective. I mean, one simple pointer to that is that if you look at the consumer courts today, the two biggest disputes that are there in consumer courts are insurance claims and developers. So I think very clearly it didn't serve the purpose for which it was created. One can keep arguing about why it didn't work, etc. I think clearly it didn't work. I think on that it didn't work to protect the interests of the consumer to the extent that it should have. The new law on paper looks extremely effective, but like all laws, I think I completely agree with Baman that the law is there now. If there is a delay of a couple of months, etc., to get it right, I don't think that delay will be begrudged.
So Rakesh Kantal, so this is something that Harsh has already answered, but my question to you would be that if at all some states are not able to meet the deadline, then what really is the recourse that consumers have? They can take the state governments to court? Is that what they do? Or the center can pull up the states? What is the option here?
Basically, it's question of presumption as of now, because the Act says that appropriate government shall form these bodies, authorities. Okay. So there is no room for alternate or options. Okay. It has to be done in a way.
It has to be done.
Yeah, it has to be done because the word shall has been used instead of will. So it is mandatory, and if the states are not forming these bodies, then Central Advisory Council is there to look after these things. So I believe we should wait for the things to happen, and 30th of April 1927 is 13th of April 2017 is the last date when it's to be implemented. So we must wait for the time, and then it will be done, I believe.
Okay, you believe it will be done. All right. So we've got actually now 5 positives, which is good. Samir Jasuja, I've heard, and this, we could be wrong, that really, at least Haryana, there is terrible amount of confusion. It's not that the state government doesn't realize it has to do. It is a BJP government, and it will have to fall in steps. But there's terrible confusion. There is, there is no housing minister, right? So nobody really knows who's going to take charge. Administratively, there's no capability. So who's going to do it?
Manisha, unfortunately, I think the Haryana government, at least as I know it, at this point in time, doesn't have its act together. I also know for a fact that the kind of number of cases that they will be faced with on day one when this body gets formed will be something that they will not be able to resolve for many years to come, which is a big question I want to ask to this forum and everybody else, that we've got all these laws and I have cases in consumer court which are lasting 7, 8 years. Even if RERA in consumer court, yes, even if RERA is formed and all these laws, so-called laws, are going to be implemented, there is no system which says how quickly will the redressal happen.
It says 60 days. Every complaint has to be resolved in 60 days. At least that's what the Act says. All right.
That is going to be absolutely impossible. If a consumer court has not been able to arrest cases for 10 years, you think any RERA will be able to address any complaint in 60 days?
All right, Baman, come in here. This is something which all of us have questioned, that is 60 days a number which is just to pressurize regulators to actually look at every case and try and dispose of? Because real estate is a far more complicated issue.
Manisha, I don't think 60 days initially would be possible. But over a period of time, once we clarify exactly what are the issues that, the authorities need to dwell into, so it might be more possible. Let me just tell you out here that, having a regulator appointed in Maharashtra is something that we should congratulate the government for, and having a very responsible, capable person who's been part of the housing industry by being VP MADA as well as Secretary Housing, has given him the entire depth of experience that he requires to resolve issues. And I think someone like him would be able to set the tone for most other regulators to follow, which would allow them to objectively address issues that need address.
Rohit Rajmodi, I'm going to come to you. The buyer is that this is likely to get diluted substantially. Now, if you read the fine print of the Act, it says within the first 2 years of notification of the proposed Act, the central government is allowed to make necessary changes in the provision to remove operational difficulties. These changes, though, have to be ratified by the Parliament. Is this worry a reasonable one, or do you think that, we needed to leave this kind of room for actually working through all the operational issues which might come up?
I think the worry is exaggerated, and I don't blame anybody for worrying so, because people, consumers have waited for long for something like this, and there's an apprehension that there might be significant dilution. But our friend on the panel, the lawyer, would be able to explain this better, that the Act cannot be adopted in an abridged fashion. It has to be adopted in totality. And while it is very important to leave some room for flexibility, because it's an Act, how it will walk, that will depend on the rules, and that's where flexibility is needed. And since the ratification power is with the Parliament, we'll have to believe in the good judgment of the Parliament to be able to balance it out, so that no unfairness happens to any of the constituents.
I'm just going to go to Harsh Rungta and ask him, Harsh, what are you worried about when it comes to implementation of RERA?
So I would not say worry. What I would say is, I think there is hope forward, and I think the key thing here is how the industry actually embraces this Act. Clearly, when this Act comes into effectiveness in any state, there will be periods of adjustments that will need, I think, some amount of working out before it settles in. I mean, You can think of the Right to Information Act. If you remember, when it was first enacted and before it really became effective, it took some amount of time before the various nitty-gritties could be worked out. I think we will see a much faster adoption as far as this is concerned. So I am not really worried about anything. I think, but it can get implemented much faster, much smoother if the industry cooperates, and that will also prevent, I think, any demonizing that the industry is worried about.
Final word from Mr. Jaishankar, sir. Mr. Jaishankar, just administratively at the state level, so here you have an outstanding IAS officer who's got huge amount of experience drafting out the rules in Maharashtra, and then probably he'll be able to bring some of the best people on as regulators as well. But I've heard a developer also say that this is just creating another level of babus or jobs for babus. Are there enough capable people to be regulators at state levels? Is that something that you also worry about? I mean, at state level, is there enough administrative capability to take on the mantle of regulatory officers?
See, while RERA is welcome and some kind of regulation was needed, but going by the past record of the governments, whether it is in the center or state, most acts will add to additional time, additional cost, and there will be huge challenges of implementation. In my opinion, it's bound to delay project implementation or project launches, which in turn will have an effect cost increase by way of interest cost and carrying costs. And it is certainly not going to help in ease of doing business if the government is that is what they intend to do. Having said that, I'm not saying the act is not required. It is too late to debate or discuss that.
All right, so if there was one wish from the RERA or how RERA is implemented going forward, what would that be, sir, from your end? Baman actually has said, let there not be any
right now the entire onus is on the...
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, that is one. Right now the entire onus is on the developer, but I think the act should also include the governmental authorities and civic authorities who are responsible for giving the permissions or, in most cases obtaining permissions, be it commencement or be it completion certificates. That is what delays the project substantially. I think government authorities and agencies and officers should also be brought under RERA.
Baman, I know you got the last word already in, but is there anything else? I can see that you want to say something more.
Well, Manisha, very simply put, what I want from RERA is once an approval has been given, that approval should not be withdrawn, taken away, no matter what. It should be kind of a title or a approval insurance given to the developer, because most of the delays that take place or would take place are only because approval processes keep on moving from, time to time. It's a concrete building, like I say time and again. It takes about, 3 to 5 years to build it. You cannot make changes in rules halfway through. And if there was any kind of an insurance to a developer that said, once you register under RERA and the approvals that are in place will not get challenged in any court of law, I think a lot of these issues would get sorted out.
Okay. I might as well give Rohit also one last word.
Most importantly is to have the development authority of the municipal corporation as part of it. It's a three-legged race, and then we are missing one partner over here. And that's most essential.
Sameer, that's the most valid demand. I think that should have been done. However, it got missed out in this act completely.
Okay, yeah, I completely agree with you that this is a three-legged race, and everybody has to participate together to ensure that the development gets done in the right in the right amount of time, and the consumers who are suffering the most don't have to go to the doors of RERA in thousands and thousands. And one last thing that I'm not too sure of that I'd like to add, does RERA have a provision for class action lawsuits? Because that will reduce the number of complaints by at least 30 to 50%.
Rajesh Kanthal, do you know anything about class action suit in RERA? At least I couldn't make out, or I don't have that legal eye when I read the act.
Pardon me?
A class action suit, instead of individual buyers going, can they all get together and approach? Should be possible, right?
It should be possible, but right now I believe the consumers are getting together and they are forming a group and they are approaching the bodies.
No, but what is happening is that every consumer has to file an individual case with the consumer because
that's
every
true.
apartment is a different case as per the consumer commission.
So I guess that's the kind of operational difficulty once at state level is explored. Those are the kind of things which will be taken care of. But we're going to wrap on this debate on a very positive note that everyone's very positive about RERA. I mean, you look at the property data, about 1.47 million residential units across 7 major cities in India delayed by 14 to 30 months. So seriously, it's not just RERA, but also ease of doing business, which has to be improved upon for the real estate sector, because it takes two to tango. And this government, the Modi government, came to power on that plank of improving ease of doing business. Have they really done it for real estate or not? We'll come back and explore that. Stay with us.